remember coming from another tour with another group up from Missouri. And we came to Duluth, Minnesota, and we came to the Scottish Rite auditorium, and there was Glenn on stage with Charity, and I heard you.
And you said, what in the world is this?
No, but that was my first taste of Charity.
Wow.
January 72.
Yep.
Wow.
The other band was called The Sheep, and from Jesus People in Milwaukee, and they were an incredible band. And but they had more opportunities to do concerts than they were able to take up, and do. And so the idea was tossed out by the leadership. Maybe there's another band here. And what I remember, there were a lot of musicians, but I ended up being the only one that followed up on it. I did a lot of fasting and praying and asked around and put together a small group. And I put it to actually December 12, 71. The first concert was, I think, the 18th.
Of December?
That's right. On the way up toward Duluth in northern Wisconsin. I don't remember the town.
Probably Marshfield.
Somewhere up there, Marshfield, Spooner. And what I do remember is, there might have been 35 people and about half of them prayed to receive the Lord. It was just acoustic. Basically, Love Song was the only band that I can recall. Larry Norman had done some stuff. We actually covered, I think, 4 or 5 Love Song songs. And then I'd written some songs, and I think maybe we had a big 9-10 song set. So that was it for a while, And but just that whole era was Jesus movement, and it was just a matter of sharing testimony, sharing how we'd come to the Lord, sharing scripture, and within that next year we were doing concerts in Jacksonville Beach, and our buddy Bob Hay likes to talk about that. We had gone full on rock by that time, and he likes to say I knew him when their big hits were "Oh Happy Day" and "Give Me Oil in My Lamp." We'd made the change within about 5 months, and why we did it is because I noticed that people they weren't paying attention to acoustic music. I'd be going into a clothing store buying a pair of jeans, and they'd be playing Black Sabbath and Hendrix and Cream, and then we'd go to a coffee house, and I don't mean us, I don't mean Charity, but other Christian musicians that were actually quite good. We're doing acoustic music, and people were, out in the coffee house flirting with their girlfriend or whatever. And I'd go, they're not even listening, And of course, when we started playing, all the amps cranked on 10, you either listened or you left, I guess. That's all you know.
Well, pretty soon, too, the name was changed from Charity to Resurrection Band, and we were trying to come up with a different name than Charity, and you actually came up with the name.
Well, it was because people were coming up with names like Oil of Joy and Obadiah.
I remember that.
No.
Cool.
And you came up with Resurrection Band, music to raise the dead.
Resurrection Band came out of, like Glenn had mentioned here, the Jesus People movement that really had moved from the West Coast to the Midwest in early 70s. This was in 1970, 71. And through that outreach, of course, is really where Resurrection Band came out of. We were part of a little communal Jesus house in Milwaukee at the time. We really were started out as a ministry. We had a clear vision from the very early days.
We were musicianaries.
Yeah, we came out of that time where we were there to play our music and to share the gospel, and that was kind of what was happening. And it was an exciting time.
Oh, great.
Those early years in Res Band, as we traveled around, it was not that unusual for us to have literally hundreds of kids at these concerts, and we'd share our testimonies, share our faith. give an altar call at the end and have half the crowd come forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people were crying and praying, and it surely wasn't because, of course, if we ever go back and listen to some of those surviving tapes from the very early 70s.
I have one of those.
Oh, man, I do too. I think I have one from like around late 72, 73. And, you know, yeah, we obviously were not doing much on our musical merit at the time. But it was really the heart, and really it was the move of the Holy Spirit. As the Jesus People movement and this whole revival happened here in the Midwest. And it was an incredibly exciting time to be a band and to be out there ministering. And
yeah, we still meet people today that came to the Lord during those times that are now in some sort of pastoral work or church ministry, and it was an exciting time of revival.
And what I remember about Stu, and that was in Chicago, by the time we'd come up and been established in Chicago in 73, 74, didn't you start coming to Bible studies that we were doing?
I did. I had come to accept Christ in 1973, and I didn't grow up in the church, so I came out of this vacuum of, like, resurrection. What did that mean? I didn't even know what the word meant. I didn't know how to spell it. I remember John helped me remember one S and two R's.
one S and two R's.
And so in 1973, I really got saved and really wanted to grow, and so I was just excited to hear somebody teach about Christ. And so I found out about this Bible study that was hosted by Jesus People USA, which is the community that we all eventually have spent most of our lives in. And so in January of 1974 is when I moved in. And I had been a musician, that had been my life. But I didn't understand this Christian music thing. I'd never been exposed to that. And when I first heard Resurrection Band, I thought, man, that's really weird. I don't know what to make of this. I never heard anything like this, and I wasn't sure if I liked it. But I thought the people were okay. But but anyway, I did become part of the community in January of 1974, and for quite a while I didn't have anything to do with music, and I never thought I'd be part of this band. But I was asked to join the band later in that year. I think it was probably the fall of the year, somewhere around there.
Really talk about the early days of touring without talking about the bus.
Oh my.
And boy, there are so many stories about all the different buses that we traveled on.
But they were all red.
They were all red, and they all had, in huge letters, Jesus on the side. Mm-hmm. So you knew when we came into town that there was these very unusual group of people coming into town.
Mildred, there goes Jesus.
And so wherever we went, it was a real statement with the bus. And Roy was our faithful driver.
He was
for many years.
I saw Resurrection Band, I think it was later on in 73. They played up at my old high school up in Houghton, Michigan. And
Upper Peninsula.
Upper Peninsula.
In the Yoop.
And then they played there again, I think about a year later, and I remember hearing their testimonies, and some guy witnessed to me afterwards, and I thought, we'll see what happens, Then a friend of mine joined, and he started witnessing to me and sending me Cornerstone newspaper back then, and letters, and I ended up praying with him over the phone, I think early 74, and joined like in April of 74. Shortly after that, I started, going on the band plays, is what they were called, I think. And they had a little cassette, Music to Raise the Dead. And another one that was acoustic, All My Days, and we would sell those at the shows and everything. But
74.
Yeah, and then shortly after that, I kind of got drafted into roadie and bus driving, but we took that old bus that was not made to travel all over the country.
What I remember is, and every now and then I mention this to John, remember we had a sold-out, it had been sold out in Toronto. And it was the first time we'd gone to Canada. And I thought, well, I hope they're going to be open to us. And the promoter called up and said, this was like 2 weeks ahead of time, said, sold out. You know, everybody's all excited.
Neil DeLandra.
And we come to the border, and the crazy bus has a problem. And I remember they said, "Oh, the press is waiting, the local TV." We were behind the bus, literally pushing it across the border.
Yes.
Like, here they come, the Conquering Rock Band. And we're out there, we're back there, and
With our
it's
school
raining
bus.
out. We're sweating, we're miserable. There's a bunch of mud. We're like, Lord have mercy, pushing that thing across the border.
Oh, boy.
Because as a band, we were really an outreach out of this communal house, this Jesus house. And as the band went on, of course, this ministry began to grow. But even in those early years, we didn't tour just, you know, the 5 or 6 of us.
Oh, no.
We toured with 25, 30 people on the road, and we were a traveling show. So we rolled into town. We were like a circus.
Yes.
And we spent those first couple of years traveling, really going from town to town. And of course, at that point, we called them Jesus rallies. They weren't really concerts, and we would often go into a town. And maybe we had intended to only be there for 3 or 4 nights, but we almost never, of course, came in and do one night. It was like when we came to an area, we were there to hold you know, several concerts in a row. And of course, some of our earliest concerts we did, we ended up being there for several weeks in a row.
Yeah.
And we played every single night in like a high school auditorium or a gymnasium.
That's right.
And we would see hundreds of kids come out and make commitments
yeah.
to the Lord. But as we traveled, those early years, it was in, what was it, in 1973 that we, after about a year being on the road, we ended up settling in Chicago.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah, spring of 73.
Yeah.
And of course, as the band continued to travel all those years, for at least the next probably, 10, 12 years, as we traveled out of Chicago as a home base, we still would bring, you know, it was easy when you would book
Wives,
Res
children.
Band to play somewhere, we would show up with 25 or 30 people.
That's right.
Because everybody wanted to come. Yeah, between our wives and
built
kids
bunk
and
beds
friends
in
of
the
the
back of the
community.
We were kind of like a traveling discipleship school.
Yeah,
We'd
I think
take all
you're
the
right.
younger ones we were mentoring. I
It
remember
was
we'd
a
always
fun
pick up a pet or two along
right.
the way.
That's right.
I remember a snake and a hamster, and boy, it was something else.
We see wave after wave of people in the street playing their songs but missing the beat.
Waiting Your Pie was just such an incredible thing because, you know, we didn't know when we would ever be able to afford to do an album. I mean, really what it was, how we had toured, it's the same kind of situation in terms of doing the album. People would say, could we buy your music? And we'd like, you're going to have to bring a tape player to the show because we don't have any recorded music. And so by the time we had gotten to about 74, settled down here in Chicago, as Roy had mentioned, we did Music Trace the Dead and All Your Life, which is, for a while, we maintained an acoustic set as well as a rock set because we were able to do, you know, some acoustic concerts that would never accept the band in playing full-on rock. So came around to about 78, and more and more concerts all over the country. People coming up all the time saying, man, you got to record something. Well, we didn't have any money. I mean, you know, we could, it was just a matter of paying the bills and getting back home, you know. And so we did a little talking and praying, and among the leadership of Jesus People of our community, John and I were on the pastoral team by that time, and so I don't know who said it. Somebody might have said, well, maybe this next Sunday in church, just mention it in the prayer, you know, list when you do the announcement. Say, Resurrection Band's thinking about doing an album. We've been requested quite a bit by people, and we just don't have any money. We're not sure, whatever. Just as the Lord leads, just be praying. After the service, a couple came up who had been going to church with Jesus People regularly on Sundays, and I think maybe one of their parents had passed away and left them a bit of an inheritance, and they just, well, how much do you need? And I said, I don't even know. So anyway, we had a friend who was out in the Schaumburg area who had built a studio, and we booked it and worked like crazy for 8 days and finished the thing
I
up.
was very large with child during that
right.
entire
You finished.
entire time because I had Rebecca, I think, 2 weeks
Exactly.
after our final photo shoot.
That's exactly right.
I think to lay a little bit of foundation at that point too, of course, you know, listen to this today. There are many, many Christian record labels out there, and of course, Christian rock and roll is old hat.
Oh yeah.
But of course, at that point, there really was there were some Christian labels out there that were starting to do what they would look at as contemporary music.
Petro, Larry Norman.
But it was not really hard rock and roll. We were way too Christian to have been able to go to a mainstream label at that point, because we really were definitely a ministry band and had a real agenda of sharing the gospel. And yet the only Christian labels out at that point that we were aware of were doing music, that we wouldn't have fit on their label, and they wouldn't have been interested. So there wasn't really an opportunity to just go, sign a contract or with some Christian label. We were really on our own. At that point, we realized if we're going to do something, we got to take the bull by the horn and let's just go record the album first, and then we'll see where in the heck it goes.
Well, what I recall is contacting every label that I knew of in the U.S., Canada, and England that were Christian labels, and either got no response or that's great, but we don't know if we can do that because it's just so intense and it's so rock and roll, whatever. And I do remember one secular label that said, that's fabulous, change your lyrics and we'll consider it, And so the last group on the list, because they weren't really a label, Star Song was a custom label, which meant you came in with the money, you paid them, they had a studio, they put out an album. It wasn't like a label that actually provided the finances and helped market it and do all that. And they said, we don't have any money. In fact, we were about to get a hold of you to see if we could make a deal for Res Band to record in our studio in exchange for Star Song label ad space in Cornerstone Magazine. And we said, well, I said, that'd be great, except for one thing, the album's already finished. we already have the masters. We're done. It's mixed. We're just looking where to press it and how to get it in distribution. And Daryl Harris said, hang in there. Don't do anything. We really don't have any money. But tell you what, send it to us. And I'll never forget this. Roger, who is engineer here at Tone Zone Studio, Stu's younger brother, who had did the live sound tech work for Res Band for years and years. Roger and I came out of that studio heading west in Schaumburg, in the suburbs of Chicago. The morning we completed, there was nobody left but Roger and me. Everybody else was gone home or, fried. And he and I walked out, and it was such an incredible thing to finish this first album. And I was so blown away by how good it all sounded, and just, wow, Lord, you provided the money, the time, the studio, everything. We walk out on the sidewalk in front of the studio, and it's this gorgeous morning. The sun had just come up, and there were like these beautiful puffs of clouds all over, and really pretty sky out there. And we're standing there on the sidewalk, it's kind of cold, looking up, going, thank you, Jesus, thanks for helping us to get this done. What an incredible thing. And I said, Roger, what day is it? And he said, it's Easter Sunday. And I'm like, Resurrection Band, Easter Sunday, whoa. It blew me away. I mean, it was like, wow. I mean, we had been in the studio and it had been so intense, I'd forgotten what day it was, much less that it was Easter morning, So pretty incredible for awaiting your reply to actually be finished at that point.
And it hurts me so to see that box I know filled with photographs of things I knew. But you promised me you'd make all things new. Paint a picture of a lonely life.
Rainbow's End. Rainbow's End was, I think, in a lot of ways, our most creative effort. We tried a lot of things that we had not heard anybody do and that we dreamed of doing, but the reason why we were able to do that, I think largely, is because we got the keys to the place. I had a friend, Gary Loiseau, who owned a studio, and he wanted to take some vacation time, and so he gave us the keys, and we just locked ourselves in there and we ate White Castle hamburgers. We lived on that for, how long were we in there? Now that one we spent some time.
Probably 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
At least 2 weeks.
5
weeks. 5 weeks. We were there for quite a while. So we did a lot of experimenting. We used guitar synthesizers. I think that's when I built the guitar synth. Was it during that era?
Yep.
Yeah.
It was before, but you brought it there to the studio.
Anyway, we were using all kinds of crazy instruments. We had dulcimers. Glenn was playing dulcimer.
Miking techniques too.
Yeah, and didn't you play that hot dog whistle on a song too? Was that on that album?
I think maybe.
Anyway, we did a lot of
There's
creative
a lot
things.
of wild stuff going on.
And we just lived in there, and so.
Not only did we do very controversial music for that time, but we wanted to have a real art statement in all of our album art. And we had some great album art through the years. And particularly on Rainbow's End, it was sort of this controversy. Because first off, the album was a little more rocky, a little more experimental than Star Song really loved. And they were kind of like thinking, man, there's nothing there for the radio play. And we were thinking, who's going to play us anyway? And they like paint a picture because it was kind of soft and pretty. And we were thinking, what does that have to do with anything? You know, this is a great project. And so when the album art was done by the Cornerstone Magazine newspaper staff, it was gorgeous, and it was one of these pull-outs.
Yeah, Janet did.
Janet did it.
Janet Cameron,
It had
Tom's
cut-out
wife.
windows,
Yeah,
remember?
and it had the
right.
cutout windows, and it was beautiful. And actually, we had how it was supposed to be was the storm clouds, sort of these beautiful kind of purple gray clouds looking through the window. And when you open it up, it was Jesus coming over Jerusalem. Of course, they thought that's a little bit too, much. So they turned it around, and on the flip side of the pullout were these stained glass windows. And so they turned it around when they manufactured it and put the stained glass windows in it.
We got an invite at that time from Sweet Comfort Band, that it was a California kind of surfer rock band out there, which later became good friends of ours. They had signed with Light Records, and Light, of course, had been a pretty traditionally more conservative label, and they had said, hey, you guys should think about coming over to Light. And we're thinking, you got to be kidding me. I don't think Light would give us the time of day. No. We want to do a live rock and roll type stuff. No. But I remember that they talked us in, and we did. We went out and met with the guys from Light, and definitely came from different worlds, but we really hit it off well with them, and we signed a 3-album deal with Light, and that's where Colors came from. Was our first album with Light.
My pride wants me to hide inside myself, but I love you, Lord, and I don't want our love put on the shelf. I'm tired of fighting to be what I am. Jesus, make me what you want me to be. Because of you, I desire reality.
We began, I think, recording at the Chicago Recording Company right about that time. We moved from Pumpkin, where we had done Rainbow's End. And CRC was an interesting studio. It was a big studio, high-dollar studio, downtown Chicago. We determined that we didn't want to somehow sacrifice our relationship to our wives and our kids and the church by recording in L.A. or somewhere else. So, you had to do what you could in the city, but this was an incredible studio. Phil Bonanno, who had done some pretty big production. He had worked with Survivor. Jim Peterick from Ides of March had gotten that band together. They'd had some pretty big hits, and all of a sudden we find ourselves in this high-dollar studio and recording Colors. We did, what else did we do there? Mommy, Don't Love Daddy Anymore. And what I remember is real late night sessions. And one of the weird things that I remember, and I don't know, Stu, if you remember this, at one point we were looking at each other, and I'm like, this song, Can't Stop Loving You, got to have a keyboard part on it. And it kind of goes like this in my head, and I'm trying to, and I don't play keyboards. And Stu said, you play it. And I'm not, you're not serious, are you? He said, you play it. So I'm like, I think I actually recorded part of it, and he basically dubbed it, made a loop, and put it in a few other places in the song. I don't know if I played the whole song, but I remember some late night sessions. I also remember they had a really extensive free game room because we were playing serious Space Invaders and Pac-Man and all that kind of stuff in between, doing parts. But
I remember something about the game room. Somebody would be down in the studio working on an overdub or something. The rest of us would be up in the game room.
Yeah.
There come a point where everybody had to come down to the studio and listen and give approval or whatever. And so we'd get caught up in these games, and nobody would want to come. So Phil would shut off the power in the room.
Yeah, I remember that.
That's the only way he could get us out of there. Oh man, I had a good game going. I can't believe he did that.
I remember, Stu. I think you were our Space Invader.
You were rocking
that time.
He'd always
that thing down.
they'd start hitting him, and he'd go, "My gun's jammed." I was like, "My gun's jammed."
Okay, I remember something about that recording because this was we recorded that late at night.
Yes,
and again,
very
like you
late.
said, this was really our first album where we had a real budget.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, we had a recording budget, and we didn't have to do it quite so on the fly. And we were down there at this nice studio, but we were working evenings there. And I remember they had a camera that showed, that was always on there. You could look outside the front. So I think when somebody rang the doorbell, they could see who was there.
Right.
And one night I remember looking at the camera, and there's all this ruckus going on. So we go out there, and there's a gunfight going on right in front of the studio.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I remember an off-duty police officer shot and killed a guy right there on the sidewalk.
And here we are singing songs about the city and the situation that we live in every day and the reality of it all. And it's just like, whew, if you ever needed anything to hammer at home, there it was.
Yeah.
You couldn't do pretty, sweet music, song after song, and deal with some of the things we had to deal with and living in this environment.
As we went on in the years and recorded more and more albums, some of those first albums and those songs on them were special to us in the fact that we actually performed live the entire album.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then, of course, after 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 albums down the road,
Don't have the time to
we
do
would
it.
really, between doing maybe an 18 to 20 song set,
Right.
we would really end up playing a large number of those early songs, and you would only add a couple of new songs
That's
to each
right.
album. So of course those kind of became ingrained in us, and to this day,
Yeah.
I'm probably more familiar with Awaiting Your Reply, Rainbows In,
Colors.
and Colors
Right.
than I am even some of the last albums that we
Yeah.
did.
I loved Colors, but I know one that really hit me was Benny and Sue. And because it was one of those things that,
Story song.
well, it was a story song, but it was also one of those songs that we did live, and you never knew what key you were going to start it in.
There
It
were a
was
couple
like one of those. It was like a mental block, and I would be, left hanging out there,
It was at about that time that I remember the set list
Got bigger.
Magic
and
Mark,
they had
yeah, bigger and D.
I would remember sometimes, the song would be going, and I'm going, this is not the right
Yeah.
key. He's playing one key, you're playing another key, and I'm singing. And I'd always go, oh Lord, don't let Benny and Sue be on the list tonight. It'd always be one of those silly things.
Well, I remember doing Colors, that song, live.
Oh, yeah.
I think one of the first times we ever played out at Calvary Chapel.
Yeah.
Chuck Smith's
Costa Mesa.
the big Calvary there in Costa Mesa, and it was we used to go out there. A lot of times we would end up doing multiple shows. We'd play a
Right.
show and they'd pack it out. A couple thousand kids fit in that church, and then we'd do another one an hour later. And I remember one of my most embarrassing moments ever playing. Somehow or another, in the middle of that song, I think the first time we had played there, I believe, packed out house, and in the middle of Colors, there's one little part in there where the beat kind of turns around,
Yeah.
and I turned the beat around, and I didn't even know it, and I am literally completely off with the rest of you guys, but
In
I'm in my
perfect
own
time, in
world.
perfect time, but-
In perfect time, but completely had turned the beat around, and I'm playing away, and all of a sudden I realize everybody else in the band is looking at me, and then I realize, oh man, I've completely turned the beat around, and I just had this mental block. I couldn't get it turned back around in my head. I finally just stopped. Heard, of course, live, listening on stage, it's a roar up there.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when we play these churches.
Oh, yeah.
They weren't built for rock and roll. Finally, I realized where we all were, jumped back in, but I remember I wanted to go out back and put my head
Oh, boy.
One thing that I want to say about DMZ is a lot of people didn't know what it meant, and of course it stood for Demilitarized Zone. Military Man was on that project, Babylon, a number of pretty intense songs. DMZ was recorded in Tone Zone Studio, which is where we are right now, when it was just an old warehouse. I mean, down to the bare walls and nothing. There was nothing here. And I remember probably Stu and John will remember more than I will the details of the gear, but we rented the gear to record the album, and we ended up knocking out some walls, so we had one big room to record in. We had mattresses all over the place to help with the sound, and then we put a mattress, I think, up on the door of a corner room, which we turned into an AirSats control room, you know, with the tape machine and the board in there and everything. And
Well,
I'm still blown away by the sounds we got on that album.
yeah, this was actually our third album from a 3-record deal that we had with Light, and at that point, we were tired of paying for, you know, big studio. We really, I think as much as we enjoyed recording downtown at a high-dollar studio with all the gear, we were also punching the clock.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And we kind of yearned for those days back even in the old Rainbow's End when we could take all the time we wanted to. We could be creative. We could do crazy things. And Cornerstone Magazine was housed in this building right here in Chicago. And this was an old 3-story warehouse kind of building that we had bought in one of the toughest, more impoverished neighborhoods in Chicago.
There was a bullet hole in one of the windows.
Yeah. And so we came in here and literally recorded that album. I mean, we rented the gear. We was set up on tables and chairs. We had mattresses. And this was our third album we did in here. And it gave us the really the freedom to, even though it wasn't this, you know, high-dollar environment, it gave us the freedom to really have a lot of fun and to, again, kind of get back to doing albums the way that really we wanted to, and that we continued on from there for years to come.
And about that time, we started working on a deal with Sparrow, and we signed a 3-recording project deal with them, and we were able to invest in this building and actually turn it into a studio. And the goal of that was to give us the flexibility and the freedom to really be creative and do whatever we wanted to do. And so this building has turned out to be a real blessing to us in that way.
Well, after DMZ, we did Bootleg. And Bootleg was our first live album.
Very intense live album.
Yes. And we did it over 2 different concerts at the Odeum.
At the Odeum, yeah.
Right
here in Chicago.
And Steve Taylor opened for us.
That's right.
He was just a new artist, and we had met him and gotten to be friends with him and taken him on the road with us all over the U.S. And that was a really wild 2 nights.
Those were intense shows.
Yes, they really were.
That was back, I believe, if it was in live Bootleg that we had begun to experiment with electronic drums.
Yes,
Actually, at that concert.
Game room.
Yeah, we had 2 drum sets set up side by side, and I did a couple of songs, and I think Game Room made it on the album. That was all done over on the electronic drums. So I had to kind of jump back and forth that night between the 2 drum kits. But
That's right.
Yeah, those were fun times. We'll say it again,
we did actually in that live concert, we had come up with this idea to do a medley to incorporate these 4 songs. And we did Colors, City Streets, Broken Promises, and Autograph. And I remember, that was just something to pull off live because it just took so much breath.
We were crazy.
Yeah, it was so long, too. But it was really neat.
I remember the audience, both those nights, was just amazing.
Oh, we had a
really, really amazing.
Great audience. And
I always loved the artwork on that album with the big boot and the bootleg and and I remember people later asking me confused like why is it called bootleg? You know, is this like, because of course bootleg had the connotation of some sort of illegal recording, but we just thought it was fun.
Yeah, that was a really neat recording, and it also had your sermon. And I to this day will get an email or something, and they'll say, I listened to that entire, album, and I prayed with your husband
Glenn's
at
rap.
the end at Glenn's Rap.
Wendy's Rap?
Yes, Wendy's Rap, Glenn's Rap. And it was kind of our idea to actually be able to present an entire concert and the entire feel, musically, artistically, and even spiritually, that we could record that and to have that for people as an experience. And I think it turned out great.
No doubt, one of the really fun things or memories I look back at is all the places we got to visit over the years. All the tours we did. And I remember the first time we went to Australia. And of course we were there for quite a while.
Everywhere but Darwin.
It seemed like we almost killed ourselves because I remember they had a van that they loaned us, but it was a stick shift. And they let us drive it around on our off days, and we were cruising all over. But you had to learn to, you had to shift with the other hand.
And you're on the wrong side of the road.
Wrong side of the road. But we had a lot of great times over there, and yeah, we even got to travel over to Perth. It was quite the time. And
Yeah.
of course, you remember we went to
Tasmania.
Remember we went to Adelaide.
Oh,
And,
the pie cart.
they told us when you're in Adelaide, you got to make sure
Floaters.
that you eat a floater.
Yes.
And we're like, what in the world is a floater? And it turns out there's these late night little food stands that open up along the side of the road, and it's really a meat pie in a bowl of green pea soup. I don't know exactly what it was. And we went to this place late at night. This is after the show. These things are open late, and it was probably 1 in the morning. We pull over at a floater place, and the guy, I remember sliding that bowl. This guy was completely covered in tattoos, and he had a shirt on that said, "I'm a floater promoter." And so we ordered a floater, and I remember him sliding that bowl of soup with that floating meat pie in it. He takes his ketchup bottle, so the squirt kind, he jams it in it, and he starts pumping it until all the seams of the meat pie kind of just explode, and this ketchup comes drooling out, and he slides it to me. And I'm looking at this thing thinking, oh my goodness. But I do remember this. I wasn't that impressed with him, but I loved his t-shirt, and I swapped t-shirts with him that night.
Yes.
I said, hey, tell you what. So I pulled off my Res Band t-shirt, and he gave me his floater promoter shirt, and I had that thing for years.
Yes,
a shirt that said,
floater
I'm a
promoter.
floater promoter.
Yeah, we made a lot of friends in Australia. We've been there several times.
New Zealand, all through England, a lot of Greenbelt festivals, and
Oh,
oh my goodness.
I was so afraid at our first Greenbelt Festival. It was right after DMZ, I think. And I remember I wore this horrible silver lame outfit. And I remember looking at everybody, and I'd never seen that many people at one time. You know, and they were all looking at me, and I was like, I can't do this. And I was terrified. But you only had a few minutes. Like, they were real strict on the time, you know, and they had a guy over there, you know, who was like, off, on. And I remember we just started, and there it was.
Well, so many of those concerts. Flavo in Holland, huge festival that we played at.
Yeah.
Several times back there, and you know, pretty amazing. You've seen thousands of people all dancing throughout your entire set.
Oh, yeah.
what
And
was
they knew the
cool,
words.
They knew all the lyrics, and at the second we'd stop, if they thought maybe they're going to say something, they dead silent and listen, and we could, you know, just intro a song, whatever, and bang into the song, and they were all going nuts again. And but night after night, all through Germany, Christmas rock nights, and a lot of festivals there.
One of the most incredible tours we went on was for 6 weeks.
That's right.
And we took all of our family.
10 countries.
We took nannies for our kids, everything.
Jerusalem open.
Yes, and Jerusalem
That's
traveled
right.
with
That's
us,
right.
and we were there for 6 weeks all over Europe. And it was kind of like this evangelistic, artistic investment that we still have today.
France, Switzerland.
Oh, yeah.
We were up in, of course, Holland, England, Scotland. I remember also
over Germany.
And of course, Germany, Scandinavia, all through Norway, Sweden, Finland. I remember Holland, Finland. You remember it was a huge, like an ice hockey place that they'd covered with the wood, and they had a pile of bands playing. And while I remember that in particular, man, it was so hot. We had done this set, and there's thousands of people out there going nuts. The set ended, and they escorted us back to the dressing room, and they said, oh, the press is here, and there's 18, 20 people smashed in with cameras and mics and the whole bit from radio and TV. They said, you know, interview time. And I'm like, I'm soaked. You've got to let me change, you know. And they're all looking at me like, you can't do that. And I said, no. I'm just, please, just give me a minute. And they're all like, you know, they didn't want me to leave. They were afraid I wasn't going to come back and do this interview that they were all waiting for. And I went, sauna. And when I said sauna in Finland, they're like, okay, you know. They're like, okay, we understand that. And sure enough, they let me go and jump in the shower. I took about a 5-minute sauna and came running back. Nobody left. And, you know, I did the interview. They were happy. Oh, you like sauna? Great. You know, that we accept. But
I remember one of the first times that I can't remember if it was Germany or where, but one of the first tours we did over there, and of course we had shipped at that point. You know, Rez had done a lot of shirts over the years, and there were these real rock and roll, a lot of black shirts. And I remember we had shipped all of our shirts early, all of our merch, and all the shirts that we were bringing with us over to Europe. And we got to the first concert hall we were playing, or the first venue, and there was all these rock and rollers there, and everybody in their black leather and boots and all this stuff, and they're chomping at the bits when the doors opened up, and they want the merch. They all rush to the T-shirt table, and we're still setting up. This is about an hour before the show, and the merch is just getting out, and we're opening all these boxes that had gotten shipped to us. You know, we'd shipped over there a month ahead of time. The only boxes that went through that had made it somehow, I have no idea to this day what happened to the rest of them, were these little, like pastel colored, almost like little like belly top type shirts that had this little grid on them, and they were really some shirt that was really like a girl shirt.
Yes, yes, I remember those. They were sleeveless.
And sleeveless little shirts, and of course these guys are all looking for these, you know, black biker looking, and this is all we have, and they bought them. I remember seeing these guys running around with all their stuff, with these little turquoise-looking little belly top sleeves. I remember feeling so embarrassed. I'm like, where's the shirts? And this is the only thing that came.
Yeah.
Somebody in customs somewhere ended up with quite a few boxes of red shirts.
Gunfire, see the blood run, feel the rage. I see a black man, see a colored man in a cage.
South Africa was an incredible experience. We played every major city there except Bloemfontein, which somebody told us later, if you would have gone there, you probably would have never left. You know, they would have killed you. And because we had done songs about apartheid for years, and it was a pretty interesting time. We were, all over the country, just concert after concert, festivals, in large churches, in the townships near Soweto, near Alexandria, near Cape Town, near Johannesburg, near Durban, and met so many people who, to me, one of the most incredible situations that came up. People were so kind to us and so receptive. And I remember on a day when Res Band had nothing going on, I remember they took me into a factory where the owner was a Christian, and some of the people were, many of them were not, and they didn't speak any English at all. And a guy came in to interpret for me, and he said, would you do an acoustic blues set? And I remember I did a set. And what I remember is halfway in the middle of that set, bringing out a harmonica, and they'd never heard a harmonica or seen one. So I played this harp song, and everybody went nuts. At the very end of the day, I had like 45, 50 minutes to do this set during lunch hour. It was packed, everybody came. At the very end of the day, they just did this ovation, and people were crying. I mean, I'd made some comments about, we love you, we're praying for you, we went through our own civil war, and so powerful stuff. They wanted me to do one more song, so I didn't know what else to do anymore. I pulled out the harmonica and did a song, and then tossed the harmonica into the audience, which they couldn't. I guess that impressed them or something. They were all excited, and they clapped and clapped. People were crying, and I thought, how can I say to you without understanding the language? No, thank you. It's a privilege for us to be in your country. It's a privilege for us to see your patience and your forgiveness and your compassion. And I didn't know what to do anymore. I kind of spontaneously got on my knees, and there was this audible from the crowd. And I just got on my knees and thank you, thank you. I started crying. I go out there, and I got in the car, and my driver turned to me and said, do you know what just happened? And I said, well, pretty amazing. It blew me away. He said, you don't have any idea what it's like for these people to see a white man get on his knees in front of them. You have no idea the impact. But I remember concert after concert, just crowds coming up thanking us. And
it was such a cool time because, of course, it was at that transition time in South Africa.
Before
they
the
had
election.
Freed Nelson Mandela, but had not had the national election yet.
That's right.
And it was just coming. So we were right there where everybody was nervous and was really kind of wondering what the shape of the country was going to, how was it going to turn out? What was going to happen? Again, Mandela had been freed after many, many years in prison. And there was an enormous I think, a sigh of relief kind of worldwide that there wasn't this massive bloodshed going
right.
on.
That's right.
And yet nobody was really sure what was going to happen in the future. And it was a time when Christians were beginning to realize it was a time of reconciliation that was happening as a nation, as a people.
Yeah. Well, Glenn had always had this real heart for the South African black. And he had written these incredible songs.
Afrikaans and
Zuid-Afrikaan. And these were wonderful songs, and he had even been an activist, having petitions signed and delivering them to the South African embassy in Chicago. And it had been something in our hearts, for this country, to see peace, to see reconciliation, to see justice. And it was something so close to our hearts. When I first met my husband, well, not when I first met him, but when we were first romantically courting one another, he had written a rock opera. And he had felt like the Lord had really given it to him. And, I probably the Lord did. And he had it in his backpack. And he had it in the concert hall. And he'd left it back there and gone and done the concert and gone and talked with folks afterwards. And when we went back, somebody had taken the backpack with all of his...
See, I didn't know if the Lord wanted that rock opera out there.
But it had been really deep in his heart to do a rock opera.
Sure.
He had really wanted to do one.
Concept album.
Yeah, a concept album. And so years and years later, I always felt like the Lord gave my husband Lament to replace that rock opera that he wrote back in '72.
I was lamenting some guy ripped it off with all my clothes. They were all in one bag.
Yes, yeah, that is right. Yes, that was all your clothing. But it was kind of like, man took this away and God gave it back to you, this whole rock opera that became Lament.
Roy wrote some incredible songs for that album, and stuff like Surprised. And
also, that was our last studio project. And at that point, we thought, how much longer are we going to be able to keep on putting out projects and be fresh and new sounding? And so we wanted to bring in a producer, and we brought in Ty Tabor, who's a guitar player for King's X. And he really gave us a lot of nice ideas and influence and helped produce us, and I think really gave us a little bit of added or new life to the project overall, and brought an engineer who engineered the project for us and got great sounds.
I remember Lament as being, although there were many moments, that was certainly one of special moments in history of the band for a couple of reasons. We were able to do an album that told one story. The whole album told one story. So we were really able to deal with something more in depth than you could do in one song.
Right.
Over the years, we had worked with a number of different engineers, and we thought about bringing in another producer, but we had never done that. Although we had other people within the community help us with production, we never actually went outside of the community, and so this was an experiment. We were probably a little unsure of how that was going to turn out, but I think it turned out to be a really good high point creatively for us. Ty was very encouraging, and I know my experience was I felt the freedom to try and do a lot of things that I might not have been willing to do, just because of the kind of guy he was. So it was a great experience.
Well, what had happened is Mark Hollingsworth, who had been a mutual friend, he booked res shows way back in the day. Then he ended up going on to manage for years Petra. Had become friends with Ty and King's X, and he actually, I think, got a hold of us saying, "What did you think about having a producer?" And we're like, "Hey, we've always, we've got a list of these guys we'd love to have, but we can't afford them." And the truth is, Tom has done such a great job in production over the years, and so we're at the point where we're thinking about doing this kind of thematic album. We've written a bunch of songs for it. Roy came up with some cranking songs, and we talked about the theme, and so started praying and writing and whatever. So right about this time, we get a call from Mark, and he said, "Are you kidding? Would he, does he even know we exist?" He said, "Are you kidding?" It turned out later that Well, essentially the band became a King's X because he was so influenced by Res Band. He'd seen us at a truck stop in Mississippi in the middle of nowhere on a flatbed trailer, years ago. At the time he was, I think, member of a little Baptist church with a string tie or something. He said, we all came out to, rebuke this demonic rock and roll. And what was really interesting is he said, I talked to him for a minute, and then I turned to some other kid who wanted to talk. He made his way over to you and talked, and he said, I had this long conversation with Stu, and all Stu wanted to know was, am I in the Word, am I in prayer, am I plugged into a good church, what's going on in my life spiritually. Stu wasn't all loaded up on music, and he said, I got so convicted I had to go back and rethink where I was at. Turned out later he actually started a Christian rock band. They traveled all over the South, and that was the predecessor to King's X. Well, I didn't know all that. I'd never heard that until he was in the studio talking to me about it. So we're talking away, and I'm like going, wow. He said, no, when Mark told me you guys might be open, I said, I'd do it for nothing. I'd be happy to do it. He said, those albums, I cut my teeth on, the early Res albums. And I think one of the things we wanted to do, too, was think about the sound of the band. If the band is going to continue for another album or two, whatever, we don't know. We're praying. We're trying to make sense out of all of our lives, and we're all involved in ministry and continue to be. What do we do that's different? And so I had the concept of in my mind of a young guy who's just finished school, high school, and trying to figure out what life is about and what it isn't about. And I want to have some kind of fun and freedom and just travel and tour and go. And he bumps into a girl, and girlfriend's pretty much in the same boat, and they're just trying to experience life together and make sense out of stuff. And in a subtle way, not in a blatant, in-your-face way, but in a subtle way, all of a sudden the lights start coming on. There really is a God, and there is a point to life, and it's not just, moving from one feeling and one experience to the next, and what's it all mean, and we're going to die, and then we just become part of the dirt like the earthworms or something, And literally the lights come on with Surprised and Across These Fields, a lot of those songs.
Across These Fields, that's wonderful.
It's literally epiphany. It's the lights come on kind of a thing.
I started playing in Res Band. I was 17 years old. I played in Res Band for, depending on kind of how you look at it, because we didn't really ever come to this point where we said, okay, this is the end of Res Band. We just kind of eventually stopped. And people used to ask me for at least a year or so after that, like, is Res Band retired? And I'm thinking, well, I don't think we're retired. We were officially resting. But anyway, I spent at least 28 years traveling and playing with this band all over the world. It's been one of the privileges of my life to be with all you guys. So, I have great memories, and to this day, if I had to do it all over again, I'd do it in a heartbeat. I love all of you.
Me too.
Yeah, it's been a significant part of all our lives, I'm sure, and our relationships with one another have been significant. In the world of music, bands don't usually stay together very long, and we had something more substantial that our relationships are founded on. I planned on making my life, building my life around music before I came to Christ. And it's interesting when I look back and think about my years with Res Band, I don't think of it as, although I played a lot of music with you guys and we did it all over the world and made a bunch of albums and stuff, I don't really think of my life as being founded on music.
No.
It's founded on something more significant. And it has been a privilege, and it's been something God called us to, and so we were blessed to have the opportunity to do it.
If someone would have asked me when you're in high school and they have those guidance counselor moments where they say, what do you want to do in your life? What are your gifts, your talents? I would have never put Christian rock and roll artist. I mean, that would have never been on any form. But I did know that somehow God had a hold on my life. And even though I didn't know what turn it was going to take, I knew that that was the most important thing in life, that He had a hold of me. And that took an amazing turn for me, is that here I was involved in something called Resurrection Band that was really actually larger than the sum of its parts. It became much larger than that. I mean, it inspired generations of young Christian artists. It was more than just music. It also expanded our thinking on what was the church and arts, the Bible and arts. It made us think deeply. And it was wonderful. Sometimes I have to pinch myself and think, wow, did I really do that? And it was wonderful.
Well, I joined, officially joined Resin in 1987, but I had a chance to work with the band and do things with Glenn before that, including bus driving, roadieing, you know, you name it, a little bit of everything. And when they asked me to join, you know, I was kind of like a little bit stunned because they wanted me to play bass. I was a guitar player. I wasn't even that great of a guitar player. And I remember I had 2 months to learn like 21 songs, and Cornerstone 87 was my first concert. And I remember thinking, it was just like a little bit of a dream come true, I guess, kind of thing. And I just really felt, you know, honored to be able to be a part of something that I was able to see over the years that the Lord had really put together and was really using to reach a lot of people and speak to a lot of people's hearts. And just, even when I saw them back in '73, I could tell there's, you know, man, there's people really living for Jesus who are coming out of the same culture I was. So it always meant a lot to me to be able to be a part of it.
Well, I've done a lot of interviews, and people ask these questions, and I think you're living outside yourself. You know, I get into situations where I think, how do you answer these questions? And I've thought about it a lot. It's like a movie. You know, you go, is that me? Wendy said it earlier. You know, how could our lives mean anything really? If it had been a dream of a person, then it probably doesn't matter that much. People have interesting dreams. They fulfill whatever it is that they want to fulfill for their lives. But it really is being a part of something bigger, and it's really someone bigger and more important than all of us. We're friends, and we respect and really like each other and love each other, and we know each other's strengths and weaknesses, you know. But it was always based on a relationship. A relationship to the Lord, relationship to the church. Without Tom and Raj and, you know, Ed, all the crew that worked so hard, without Jesus People, without our pastoral team, who always encouraged us. To this day, you know, I get emails. People that came to know this Jesus because of something that we've done. It's a miracle, really. It just is. It's so beyond music, so beyond a performance. I started playing guitar. I was 12 years old. The first band, I was 13. We did concerts. I did concerts, for many concerts, hundreds of them, easy, maybe thousands, before I came to the Lord at 18. And seeing the difference that Jesus can make in one life, if you will surrender. And I think we're still living proof. I look back at these tours, I think back on the years, I look at these songs, I listen, and I think, man, how could it have been that God could choose? But it's like he says in his scriptures, you know, in the Word, he uses the foolish things of the world, the things that are nothing, to confound the wise, and we're all just so humbled that people extend their love and their compassion to us to this day. It's an incredible journey, and it'll never end. Jesus is raised. Mm-hmm. And we're talking eternal life, not just music, but a relationship that never ends. That's what Res Band was about. That's what Res Band is about. Mm-hmm.
I may be sailing On behalf of all of us from Res, we love you. God bless you. Good night.